For more than 12 years, California was rocked by a series of horrifying home invasions, ferocious assaults, kidnappings, burglaries, stalkings, and at least 50 rapes and 13 murders. These unforgivable assaults and killings were at the hands of one lone disturbed figure who was hidden in plain sight by day and lurking in the shadows by night. Victims, potentially numbering in their hundreds, were both taunted and terrified before, during, and after their encounters with the killer, with numerous victims holding dialogue with him whilst being bound, and others receiving unsettling phone calls after the encounter. Due to the variation and the volume of the crimes, as well as the lack of evidence left behind after each horrific attack, many of the cases went cold, and some were even completely forgotten about. This was until 32 years later, with huge advancements in forensic technology and the luck of a distant relative, that investigators were able to trace and link dozens of historic crimes to a seemingly ordinary 72-year-old former police officer, Joseph James DeAngelo. 44 years after his first confirmed crimes, the Golden State Killer was finally unmasked.
Hello and welcome to I Could Murder a Podcast. We are back with a huge case. I'm Tom Norris and I'm joined by, of course, little Benny Carter. How you doing, Ben?
Doing very well, thank you. I was focused on the alphabet then, and I've let that go, and I'm doing great as a result. So thank you so much for that. Doing really well. How are you, producer Dan?
Very good. Welcome back, boys. I feel like you've been itching to do this case for quite some time, right? Very excited for it. And also, I think there's a good discussion point to be had about statute of limitations.
Definitely, Dan. He's got his finger on the pulse as producer, Dan.
Yes.
I think it'd be quite a shock. Well, it's a shock for me even that it's taken 10 series for us to get to this case. An absolute mammoth of a case. One that you have to salute some of the police and detective work and scowl at the others, I'd have to say. But yeah, it's a huge case and we're looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, definitely. And scowl we shall, and we'll scowl a lot at one particular officer in uniform, won't we? Not to give anything away. It's hot today, isn't it? We should point out it's one of the hottest days of the year that we are filming our first episode back, so we'll do our very best. I'll do my very best not to become a sweat show.
Sweat show. Yeah, Ben will do his best not to become a sweat show, just saying different ways of keeping cool earlier, just before we started filming. So we won't go into that because it's a bit gross. But yeah, so we're going to get right into the case. We don't want to dilly-dally. We don't want to give you too much waffle. We want to get into it. But before we do, Ben, should we actually reveal today's case?
Reveal it we shall. It is the Golden State Killer, also known as the case of Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., the Visalia ransacker, the East Area Rapist, the Original Night Stalker, the Diamond Knot Killer, the Creek Bed Killer, and less catchy, Mr. Earons, which wasn't one of mine, actually, just out there.
Yeah, some of those, if you turn them into acronyms, they don't sound half as threatening. You know, the EAR, the ear. Just think of someone who's been listening to your secrets. But no, actually, there's the East Area Rapist. Oh, okay, maybe. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to get into this case. As we said, it's a huge one. Even by the fact that he has so many different names goes to show the kind of different areas he was operating in. Hence the final name he would come to. But yeah, let's get into it, guys.
March 19th, 1974. This date marks the first in a series of burglaries conducted in the Visalia area by an individual dubbed by the press as the Visalia ransacker, Visalia being the 5th largest city in California. On this particular night, the ransacker sneaks into a family home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where he proceeds to steal $50 in coins from a sleeping child's piggy bank, which is, that's a bit spooky, isn't it? And illegal.
That's a lot of money for a kid in those days.
Yes. Yeah,
definitely illegal. Stealing from a kid, definitely illegal.
Because you can't get dollar coins, can you? They're dollar notes. I mean, back then it might have been. I'm trying not to do myself, but I'm sure that's a lot of. That's a big piggy bank.
Yeah, sounds like it was a big piggy bank. Yeah, do you think you smashed it with a hammer?
No, I'm thinking actually it probably was full to the brim, which is why it didn't make enough noise to wake the sleeping child.
Ooh,
that was my suspicion.
Sleeping child, hidden piggy.
Dollar coins were first minted in the United States in 1794.
1794.
Oh, so it's been around for a long time.
It's an acronym of numbers there.
Yeah.
In a way.
Kind of.
Yeah. Over the next 20 months, the Visalia ransacker is believed to have committed more than 120 burglaries, as well as one confirmed murder in the area. Though the nature and the pattern of his crimes is quite peculiar. Rather than taking credit cards, cash... Oh, notes.
Didn't you write this, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Rather than taking credit cards, cash in the form of notes and high-value jewellery that was often within arm's reach of the properties he broke into, the ransacker would instead steal low-value, often sentimental items, such as piggy banks, as we mentioned, clothing, trading stamps, coin collections, cufflinks, and weapons. He also would intentionally rearrange and display different household items or move furniture about. He'd often help himself to items in the fridge and leave like a crummy plate on the table. But yeah, just... not your typical burglar. He was doing it more for the fact that he could rather than the desperacy of needing to burgle.
One big theme here is he likes to just play with the emotions and the fear of people and kind of gaslight people in a way, I guess, with moving furniture and stuff like that, just so like people don't know what's going on. But as you said, it wasn't for a particularly monetary gain, but you could argue trading stamps and coin collections. Cufflinks can be quite expensive though, over time. But yeah, it wasn't just going there going, I need the money. It wasn't for desperation.
Yeah, and that was it, exactly as you said. He was getting the thrill from making his victims aware that someone had been in their property.
As a gaslighter yourself, Ben, can you see the appeal for that?
No. Oh, that's a slippery step, isn't it? Gaslighting's bad.
Yeah, you're getting there.
Yeah,
but
no, none of that.
First stage is admitting it.
Dear me. I don't even really know the correct term or what the actual definition, what it is.
I'll tell you.
Okay.
You've got some traits. But anyway, we can move into it.
Fuck's sake. Gaslighting is when you tell someone they do something, isn't it? And they don't do it. Or you convince them that it's something that they do, a trait.
You could basically start pushing things onto people and making them believe things when it hasn't really happened.
That's horrible.
Kind of manipulative.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Emotionally manipulative.
Terrible.
Yeah, but working it.
So the ransacker was so successful in his first year that he would actually be able to conduct multiple ransackings across the city during the very same night, with him even completing a staggering 12 break-ins in one night.
Is there a difference between a ransacking and just a bog standard robbing?
I think ransacking is sort of going in and messing the place up a bit and moving things about, roughing things up a bit, whereas burgling is you're going there with the sole purpose to in and out, not take some...
Robbing, you're not leaving a crummy plate.
No, absolutely not. That's where the ransacking occurs.
For sure.
Despite predominantly breaking into homes to steal low-value items, the ransacker was incredibly meticulous in his planning and actions so as not to get caught in the act or leave any trace evidence behind. Because, we've had a little laugh and a joke about ransacking, but listen to what he does here, because this is the part where I'm like, he's doing it for the thrill and for the sense of power, but this is just next level. This is like high, almost like, what's that game, Dan? It's not Call of Duty. It's like, there's a famous Marine that has a series of games.
Tom Clancy.
Yeah, this is like Tom Clancy stuff, Dan, I think.
Is he the one with the torch?
I think so.
That's very vague.
No, that's Alan Wake.
Yeah, Alan Wake, right.
Great game.
There you go. Well, DeAngelo, he would wear gloves and often wear hats, masks and scarves just in case anyone did, spot him.
Max Payne didn't wear that.
He didn't, but he could
slow motion there.
Do the slow-mo jumps and dives,
Yeah. Shit film, but good game.
Yeah. He would force open multiple points of entry of the property before he actually made his break-in, so that he basically had more options for his escape route or exit route. He placed crockery, bottles and drinking glasses against doors or on door handles, so that if anyone in the house was moving towards him, he would know well in advance. And it's due to all of these different tactics that he used that he was able to go undetected and uninterrupted for so long. And 12 break-ins in one night. So he's chasing that thrill. But this would all change a year and a half later.
And now we move on to the early hours of September 11th, 1975. The Visalia ransacker got so confident in his abilities that he is believed to have returned to the one home they had previously been chased away from before he could enter the property. This was the home of 45-year-old Claude Snellin, who lived there with his wife and 16-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. At 2 a.m, Claude was woken by some banging and made his way towards his daughter's bedroom.
Come on now.
She's 16, Claude. only to find her being subdued by an intruder wearing a ski mask. As he tried to rescue his daughter from being kidnapped, the intruder fired 2 shots at Claude, which would later prove to be fatal. The intruder then physically assaulted Elizabeth before fleeing into the darkness on a stolen bicycle.
Yeah, this will become a theme, stolen bikes. I feel like as meticulous as he is, he would have placed that just leaning against the exit by the exit of the property. Spoiler, sorry.
Detectives began to stake out the area where reports of break-ins had been made, and they were able to subdue the masked man 2 months later as an officer wrestled him to the ground. His mask slipped off and the officer caught a glimpse of his face. This was later released as a composite sketch. Sadly, the ransacker was able to break free, fire a shot towards the officer, shattering his flashlight, and once again escape into the night. For 2 years, Joseph DeAngelo operated as the Visalia ransacker whilst also working as a burglary unit police officer. So as we mentioned with DeAngelo, he's very meticulous. He seems to be known exactly what he needs to do to evade escape. And with that final detail I've just revealed there, the fact that he works in the burglary unit as a police officer, he knows exactly what to look out for, exactly what to avoid. And even just being able to keep an eye on, what's been reported, when any evidence that might point towards him, he's in a very strong position. Yeah,
exactly. And this will be a theme in his career. His colleagues are now looking for repeat offenders or people out on parole that have done the similar crimes previously. And they're assuming that this person is obviously a serial ransacker, which I feel like this is the first case we've had of a serial ransacker.
Definitely. It's definitely the one we've used the word ransacker more than anyone else has ever used it.
It feels new and fun to say.
Yeah, I think it was fun at the start, first 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, so he's using that to his advantage. And obviously the rest of his unit are looking for repeat offenders rather than looking for a brand new ransacker on the scene.
And I bet he's by the water cooler, he's hearing people talking about it, he's absolutely buzzing about. They have no idea that it's him.
Yeah. So we move forward to the year of 1976. DeAngelo relocated himself and his family to Sacramento and switched from the Exeter Police Department to Auburn. And with this change in location, he also changed his criminal habits, and they would escalate from this point onwards in a much more brutal fashion. The Visalia ransacker would now become the East Area Rapist. His attention would turn to the Rancho Cordova, Citrus Heights, and Carmichael areas, where he once again began prowling different neighborhoods. But instead of searching for items to steal, he would be searching for vulnerable women and young girls to harm. Over the course of 1976, the East Area Rapist is confirmed to have committed at least 10 rapes, 4 in Rancho Cordova, 3 in Citrus Heights, and 3 in Carmichael. And in most cases, he would stalk the same neighborhoods several times before launching his attack. And he would even return to the same street multiple times to attack other victims that lived nearby his previous victims, which I would assume was definitely not something wise to do.
This case is a prime example, and one of the most clear examples for me in terms of having to build up the stakes every time. He's gone, okay, I'm going to rob, I'm just going to steal things, not things of much high value. Then he moves on to rape, which obviously is a huge leap within itself. And then it's okay, that's too easy still. I'm going to now start attacking women that live locally, because that's much harder to do. Obviously toying with police as well. You would never assume that someone who would be doing these kind of crimes would return to those kind of same streets. So yeah, it's a real clear escalation, and sadly, the escalating doesn't stop.
Yeah, absolutely, and this would be a particularly bold move for him. So he would regularly watch and sometimes even telephone his prospective victims in order to learn their daily routines. He also wanted to learn whether they had husbands or other family members in the property, and whether they had dogs. And he would also choose specific houses that had large gardens or were close to open spaces. And sometimes these victims would be stalked for more than a month in advance before he made his attack. And predominantly over the course of this year, his key targets would actually be teenage girls. His youngest victim was just 13 years old. And yeah, a lot of the neighborhoods that he would stake out were new build neighborhoods, which I guess, I'm not really sure of the thinking behind that.
The only thing that sprung to mind there would be the fact that the families would have only been there for a short period of time. I don't know why that would be any benefit.
Unless they were built with sort of, it sounds really silly, but just in bigger space, more, people were less familiar with the areas. I don't know.
New build properties are usually often built with worse material. Sorry, Dan knew what I was going to
I
say.
saw your cogs wearing there.
DeAngelo also, like, the one thing he did, which he would walk around those areas regularly and also like feed the neighbourhood dogs to try and get them to be familiar with him. And so if he was to attack the houses, they weren't, they might be like, oh, it's that friendly guy there, rather than attacking him. And the fact, stalking those houses to see when the husbands would be away or the boyfriends would be away, he was very, very calculated with his actions. I mean, and even the fact that obviously he has history, we're going to go into his early life and his history toward the end of the episode. He has certain skills which wouldn't just develop from being in the police. Like he's very meticulous and very just, I don't want to give him any kind of compliment, but he's quite creative with his ways of kind of avoiding capture.
On the note of the dogs as well, that I found this Reddit thread about him. And apparently this particular year, there was in the areas that we mentioned, the neighborhoods that we mentioned, there was a huge increase in attacks on animals. So although there were some that he claims to have been feeding and trying to familiarize himself with giving treats to, apparently some where he would be sat, in the bushes or whatever, staking out a house. If a dog came by, there were awful details about dogs returning to their owners with slit stomachs, ears cut off, tails cut off. I'll pop the Reddit thread in our Facebook group.
I don't think I want to read that.
No, same.
Enjoy that Facebook group.
No,
Jesus.
Couldn't finish it.
Difficult work.
Oh.
The year of 1977, once again, Joseph DeAngelo continues to escalate his criminal behaviours. He decides that attacking lone women isn't testing enough for his abilities. So as we said, is a real clear escalation. And yeah, testing himself is definitely the word. He wants to push boundaries and see what he can do, which is horrible. Despite almost being caught by a victim's young son who he shot and injured whilst fleeing, and so therefore he began to stalk and attack couples. Some believe that this decision was made in response to the way he interpreted an insult during a news broadcast on the East Area Rapist, where the reporter said he only attacks women that are home alone.
Yes, you can imagine him being very, as you said, leaning up against that water cooler, very happy with himself. And then when he hears this news broadcast of them saying, well, I know they didn't say it he only attacks women that are home alone. I know they didn't say it like that. Yeah. But he is interpreting, this comment as, oh, are you saying I can only do that? Which is, terrifying.
So me saying, you only gas one person at a time.
Yeah. So we're keeping that in, are we? Deary me. I'm lovely. I'm a lovely person.
That's him gaslighting
you. It is.
As a result of this escalation, he begins to only break into homes where he knows both a man and a woman will be sleeping. I find that absolutely just polar opposite what you imagine someone to do. He once again stalks houses weeks in advance in order to understand their routine and build his plan for the perfect time to strike, occasionally breaking into homes days before his attacks in order to unlock specific doors and windows. As well as doing this in terms of opening doors and leaving areas for him to get in, he would also leave items that would help him and assist him. He'd often leave tied shoelaces there, ready to tie people up, tie his victims up in the garden. So often shoelaces were found in people's gardens where they hadn't been attacked. So, the people seeing these things or finding these things, it all just added to the terror that he was reaping around this area. His MO becomes approaching the sleeping couple at gunpoint in the darkness, ordering the wife to tie up and restrain the husband, placing a series of alarms on the husband's back. As Ben mentioned earlier on, that'd be leaving plates and glasses on the back of the husband. So if they move, he can hear that they're moving, and then basically he would say, if you move and you knock these off, I'll basically shoot your wife or I'll kill you. So he was very clear with his instructions. He would then gag the husband before taking the wife into another part of the house, physically assaulting her, restraining her and raping her, sometimes numerous times. He conducts a staggering 19 reported rapes during 1977, with some multiple attacks occasionally occurring during the same week. He did all of this whilst also working as a police officer and appearing to be the model father and husband during the day, and a vicious monster by night. So was Joseph DeAngelo born this way, or was he formed?
Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was born on the 8th of November 1945 in the town of Bath, New York. He missed out on being a World War II baby by just a couple of months. He was the second of 4 children born to Kathleen Louise DeGroat, who was a homemaker, and Joseph James DeAngelo Sr. And Joseph James DeAngelo Sr., or Joe Sr., was an airman in the US Army.
Yeah, he was just good at basketball, do you?
Airman.
You're an airman. I went to sneaks. Is that what they say? Yeah, probably. Go on, carry on.
He had an older sister called Rebecca, a younger brother called John, and a younger sister called Constance, who went by Connie. Due to his father's role in the military, different assignments meant that DeAngelo's family had to regularly relocate, not just around America, but around the world. As often is the case when we've covered a lot of similar backgrounds to this when the family are in the military, and there's a lot of moving about, which made it difficult for a young Joseph to fit in, to form and maintain any lasting friendships, or build any sense of stability. On top of this, Joseph had to attend multiple different schools, which caused his academic focus to stray. And any time he came home with poor school reports, his incredibly strict father would berate and beat him. So Joseph Sr., there's a lot of question marks over this character. He would very much bring his militant manner back to the family home, and it is reported that he would treat his family as if they were his very own regiment. He would order his wife and daughters to carry out certain tasks and maintain a clean and tidy household, whilst he would demand that his sons regularly exercised, carried out their chores, and kept their appearance neat and tidy. It is believed that he would physically abuse his young children and his wife for the slightest infraction on his rule, with his wife even admitting to friends, and this is hideous, that she would dress herself and her children in 2 pairs of pants so as to try and mitigate the pain from the beatings.
Wow.
Evil bastard.
Yeah, that is evil. I mean, yeah, as you said, we've had a few cases where military backgrounds, not saying there's any link, military backgrounds and moving around and very, very strict parents. The parents are always a mitigating factor in all these cases, I swear. There's the odd one where, the parents are absolutely fine and it's just absolutely freak, but it tends to be a very strict, usually religious, I'm going to say that, a usually strict religious family. But yes, strict rules in the household tends to not always go well.
Absolutely done the military there.
Did I?
And religious.
Side note, military's cool. Traumatic experiences were not limited to DeAngelo's household for Joseph. According to an aunt, when he was 9 or 10 years old and the family were living on an army base over in West Germany, he, his sisters and some of the local children were playing in an abandoned warehouse. Joseph realised he had lost his sisters, so he went searching into a storeroom where he witnessed his younger sister Connie, who was just 7 years old at the time, being raped by 2 men from the military. As he was so young, he was unable to work out exactly what was happening to his sister, and the rest of his siblings agreed not to share any information about what happened to their mother or father, with Connie later confiding to her mother and uncle. Shortly after this incident, the DeAngelo family returned to America. Before he had reached his teenage years, several disturbing signs began to emerge in a highly isolated and traumatised young Joseph. Not long after his 11th birthday, he was reprimanded for theft as well as burglary. No ransacking though, so that's interesting.
Not yet.
Probably left a few crummy plates though.
Could have done. Kids.
He was also witnessed by other children in his neighbourhood being cruel to street cats and dogs, once pushing a neighbour's puppy into a swimming pool and trying to strangle a friend's pet cat. There are also reports that he was extremely cruel to fish he caught from the local river, often throwing them from buildings and leaving them out in the road for cars to run over.
That is weird.
I mean, all of it is weird, but
yes,
some
but
reason
that's specifically weird.
Yeah, the fish one just feels like, there's something deep lying there.
Well, I mean, to go back to the abandoned warehouse incident, that is what a lot of people point to.
Don't return to the scene of the crime, Ben. Fuck. Never played it.
To go back to the hideous incident at the abandoned warehouse, that is the moment where people, I mean, what was he, 9 or 10? So that's the moment where people basically state he saw men in power committing atrocious assault on his younger sister, and that's apparently the turning point in his life where that's completely now changed his outlook on interactions between men and women.
But it's probably his first time he's witnessed anything sexually happening as well, so obviously with the young mind formulating, not making any excuses for him, but if that's his first foray into the sexual world, obviously it's going to massively skew his opinion and the way he looks at things.
So despite all of these concerns, Joseph started to perform well at school and even joined the junior varsity baseball team. He made a small group of friends but continued to struggle making friends with anybody of the opposite sex. As he moved through his teenage years, he found himself regularly watching young couples being intimate together, and he would occasionally start to follow them around town, continuing to observe their dates and intimate encounters from a distance. This hint of voyeurism is something something that would very much remain with him later in life. And yet, still at this point, no ransackings that we are aware of. When he turned 19, Joseph followed in his father's footsteps and decided to join the US military. He joined the US Navy in September of 1964, where he served during the Vietnam War as a controlman on the USS Canberra and the USS Piedmont, and he would do this over the following 2 years. Had a little look. Controlman is someone who is responsible for sort of general maintenance as well as emergency repairs. People look at his military experience and how he would draw those skills and apply them to his criminal lives. He's essential. I don't want to belittle this role. He's a skilled mechanic.
He's a very handy man.
He is.
No, because he's doing general bits.
No, very handy man. I just don't like him being handy. I don't like that.
I didn't say handsy.
No.
You should have.
I didn't.
So obviously he's been tasked with repairing the ship should there be any damage, the general maintenance, but he still went through training in combat, stealth and survival, which provided him with skills that would once again remain with him later in life. After leaving the Navy, Joseph got an associate's degree with honours in police science. He then went on to get a bachelor's degree in criminal justice before later taking on postgraduate courses and additional police training. As well as this, he completed a 32-week police internship before becoming a police officer. Joseph's studies and training took him all around the state of California, spending a lot of time in Rocklin, Sacramento, Roseville, Exeter, and Visalia, and these were areas that he would become all too familiar with in future. It's like how, not relating this to my dad at all, but because he's a driving instructor, he knows...
And big on, right?
Because he's a driving instructor, and I need to be careful here.
Yeah.
Because he's a driving instructor, goes all around our city, knows all the back roads, knows all the shortcuts, knows every area. I hate making this reference, actually. Probably shouldn't have done.
Yeah, and I mean, they will capture that guy that's been going around the streets. Okay. He always knows how to escape.
So it's like, for example, a taxi driver that's familiar with an area.
Or a driving instructor.
Or a driving instructor that's familiar with an area. Once you work certain areas for extended periods of time, you become familiar with all the back roads. You just become very familiar is the point I've really harped on over. Yeah. Intimate knowledge of the area.
Yeah.
Is what he's gained through the work.
For sure.
Yeah.
During his studies, Joseph met and became engaged to a young lady called Bonnie Jean Cowell, a nursing student who went to the same college as him. He immediately and completely fell for Bonnie, who was not quite so sure about him. You can imagine a family dude. You've got Bonnie and Connie. Donnie's here.
Rest in peace.
Oh, my hamster. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah,
that's
I was
nice.
thinking Donnie Osmond. No, I had a hamster called Donnie. Enough about that barbecue that didn't happen. Their relationship had lasted for less than a year when Bonnie made the decision to end things. She claimed that Joseph had been violent, controlling and manipulative to her, and that things had come to an almighty fallout when he tried to force her to help him cheat on a psychology test to get into the police force. As if this wasn't bad enough, just weeks after the breakup, Joseph arrived at Bonnie's parents' house with a gun in hand, attempting to force her to marry him by pointing the gun at her.
There's other ways to go about this, isn't there?
Yeah, if you're going to pop the question, don't pop a gun out. Rule number one. I think, everyone's trying to go to Vegas, and Bonnie, very brave to, obviously someone acting so, the amount of times we've covered cases where people have been trapped in toxic, horrible, violent, abusive relationships. But she's like, that was the last straw. When I was doing research for this, I saw her being interviewed, and very strong woman, and it was a big no from her.
Definitely. And producer Dan, welcome. He's going to give us a nice quote from Bonnie.
Guess who's back? Back again.
Donny Osmond's 66, by the way, still going.
Good lad.
Looks quite good for his age.
That's all that puppy love.
Had a lot of work. Oh, yeah.
There was a tapping of glass on my window in the middle of the night. I pulled the curtain back and he was pointing the gun at me and said,
"Get dressed, we're going to Reno tonight."
"Get dressed, we're going to Reno tonight. We're going to be married." At that time, I still lived in my parents' home. I ran to go wake up my father to help me. He put me in the bathroom and told me, "Don't you come out until I come get you." Joe ran away before my father could find him.
And obviously, like we mentioned earlier on, we were saying about how DeAngelo's his first kind of witnessing sex and is seeing his sister be violently raped, and how that would have formed and changed the way he views things sexually. Bonnie did say that when they first started seeing each other, he was like adamant they have sex all the time. but the one which, isn't too odd, but then it would be constant and he'd always need it. But then when it came to the actually ejaculating, he would leave the room and wouldn't do it in front of her. And then he'd come back and, kind of want to carry on. So a bit, I'd say peculiar. I don't think, Ben, do you call it edging? I don't think he was doing that.
I don't think that's edging.
Well, trying to get to the point and then holding back.
Well, he went into another room, so no one knows what he...
Unless he was leaving it out there for Bonnie to see. Who knows if he did?
Well, that's, yeah.
Maybe he was making soap.
In my book, I would say that's probably not edging. Though I wasn't there.
Dog noise there was perfect.
Not again.
I'll probably say it's not edging. Yeah, and good on the father as well. Yeah, as Ben said, it's not the most romantic proposal.
No.
Sadly for Bonnie, and I'm sure she probably felt guilt afterwards, DeAngelo would harbour a lot of resentment towards women, and particularly Bonnie, as time would go on. So despite this shocking event, Joseph began his career in law enforcement by joining the Exeter Police Department as a burglary unit officer. He served there for 6 years, where he once again would have learned a lot of skills and received a great deal of training that he would later use in his life of crime. During this time, he married Sharon Marie Huddle, and the pair went on to have 3 daughters together with the appearance of a perfect life. However, Joseph was fired in 1979 for attempting to steal a hammer and dog repellent from a local hardware shop. He was charged with shoplifting and sentenced to 6 months probation before being dismissed from his role. During the time that he was on probation, he would do something which was, especially with what he'd been doing, quite an out there, ballsy move. Joseph made the decision to make very public threats to kill the local police chief whilst also stalking the chief's house. There's evidence of stalking around the house. So the police chief even did believe it probably was Joseph, being disgruntled from being fired, though he didn't lead that line of inquiry any further, which, it's you look back on it, you're like, oh, if he'd just done that then that could have been very different.
Yeah, I mean, even a uniformed officer attempting to steal a hammer and dog repellent, why is he not paying for it? Why is he not making that purchase on record? It's a very suspicious couple of items to try and steal.
So perhaps that's a chance missed by the police to get DeAngelo early on, which would prevent all the, what's later on to occur. But yeah, I think that as an early life, that you can see where he's learned his skills, where he's honed his craft, and the things that have really affected his mind and his psyche towards women. But now back to the timeline.
March 18th, 1977. Now increasingly aware that they have a serial rapist on their hands, and having recently released a series of updated composite sketches based on victim testimonies, the Sacramento Sheriff's Office are taunted by a series of 3 phone calls from a man claiming to be the East Area rapist. During the first 2 calls, he simply laughs down the phone at the officers, insisting that they have no idea who he is. During the 3rd call, he says the following.
I knew you'd give this to me. I'm the East Side rapist.
Clip it.
I'm the East Side rapist, and I've my next victim already stalked, and you guys can't catch me.
Dan, can you read the quote, please?
Rapist, paedophile, all the good stuff.
What a CV.
October 1st, 1977, 1:30 a.m. And now based on the volume of victims in this case, under all the monikers that DeAngelo went by, this attack actually would count as number 24. And all of the victims obviously have stories and have been, traumatized and hurt beyond belief. But this particular one is one we wanted to focus on. So during the early hours of the Saturday morning, 21-year-old Victor Hayes and his girlfriend wake up to the sight of an intruder standing over them. He had a torch in one hand and a revolver in the other. The man demands that Victor lays on the floor, chest down, whilst ordering his girlfriend to restrain him. Victor would later recall the following.
Something was said to the effect, "Don't move or I'll kill you both." He had some shoelaces in his pocket and he instructed her to tie my hands. He then tells my girlfriend to get up and go to the kitchen and then place 2 sets of cups and saucers on the small of my back. Never said that before.
Nice.
The small of my back.
Mm.
He takes her off into the living room. This whole thing goes by for 25 or 30 minutes.
Fortunately for Victor, his friends suddenly pull up into his driveway out of the blue and begin to knock on his door and call out for him. This does enough to scare the intruder off, or so they believe. A couple of minutes go by and Victor's friends decide that nobody is home, so they leave. The house falls silent. Victor, who has remained perfectly still and silent for the previous agonizing 30 minutes, calls out to his girlfriend to ask, is he gone? He is met by silence for several seconds. Imagine that. Eventually, his girlfriend responds, I think so. Victor immediately gets up and unties himself before pulling out a handgun from beneath his bed and rushing through the property. He searches his house from top to bottom before tending to his girlfriend, who had been beaten and raped by the intruder. And there's a full interview at length with Victor on YouTube, and it's absolutely heartbreaking, as was the case with many of the men in this situation. They were told by the intruder, if I hear these plates go down, your girlfriend's dead and so are you. So they are sat there knowing what's likely going on in the other room, literally knowing if they move at all, they could both be dead.
Yeah, it's a unimaginable torture. I mean, if you told me, lay still with this on your back for 10 minutes and you'll win some money. Like, even if there was no pressure, like psychological pressure on anything other than that, it'd be so hard to do that. But then with these stakes being you could die, your partner could die, it's horrible. I mean, he really got a thrill from the psychological side of these things and just being in control, torturing people. Literally, he's definitely one of the most evil people we've covered, I'd say.
Oh, absolutely. And the instance where luckily his friends, I mean, this is in the middle of the night as well, but his friends pull up. In other cases, DeAngelo would disappear into another room, pretend to be gone, and then reappear.
Yeah.
And he'd just taunt his victims like that, as he would go on to taunt the police and taunt his other victims in future as well. It's terrifying. It's absolute nightmare stuff.
December 2nd, 1977. Although there are reports of more than 10 calls made by the East Area Rapist, only 3 of them were ever recorded. We're going to go through the 3 recorded ones now, as well as discuss the other calls in the remainder of our timeline. The first recorded was made on December 2nd to the Sacramento Police Department.
Police Department, Sheriff speaking. Catch me, East Area Rapist, you dumb fuckers. I'm gonna fuck again tonight. Be careful.
For those that couldn't hear clearly within the call, this is what was said. Producer Dan.
You're never going to catch me, you dumb fuckers. I'm the East Area Rapist. I'm going to fuck again tonight. Be careful. Hang on. Be careful.
Can you do the quote? Yeah, terrifying. I mean, as we mentioned, we're going to go through some of the calls later on as well, and we'll play some other calls. There's one very infamous one that beginning of every documentary you watch, they play the same one, which is a terrifying voice. It's very difficult to place that voice with DeAngelo. If you put that voice there and you line up for people who this voice could come from, you wouldn't be putting it on him. But to be fair, even his natural speaking voice doesn't match his body.
It reminds me a lot of a film that came out 4 years prior. I don't know if you boys have ever seen it, Black Christmas. It's quite a famous horror film.
No.
Where it's like he's in the house, and loads of phone calls. It's a sorority house. Loads of phone calls are made to the sorority house. The young ladies answer the phone, and there's like a lot of heavy breathing down the phone, and then he speaks in a very similar way to the infamous call that Tom mentioned. And I feel like there's some inspiration taken from that film, definitely.
Interesting.
It's quite a spooky film. I think they've remade it. The original is worth a watch. There's a remake that I don't think is as worth a watch. But, each to his own, or her, or they.
It's just there.
Each to their own.
Yeah, there you go. As well as this call, someone claiming to be the East Area Rapist sent a poem called Excitement's Crave to the Sacramento Bee newspaper, the Sacramento Mayor, as well as Sacramento TV station KVIE.
Jesse James has been seen by all, and Son of Sam has an author. Others now feel temptation's call. Sacramento should make an offer. To make a movie of my life that will pay for my planned exile. Just now I'd like to add the wife of a mafia lord to my file. You're East Area Rapist, and you're deserving pest. See you in the press or on TV. Doesn't rhyme. See you in the press or on TV.
Yeah, it's not the best poem. And obviously that's only a little bit of it. The rest of it was also kind of waffle. Hard to know if that was written by him or it's just an inspiring poem writer. He doesn't look like the kind of guy that writes poetry. Not that there's a look of someone that has to write poetry, but...
No, I can see what you mean. When we first did we did like a filter of Disney Pixar characters, but we put them serial killers photos into it. And the one that generated of him, he would love a bit of poetry because it looks quite sweet and harmless, as most of them did in the Pixar filter. But yeah, I see what you're saying. December 9th, 1977. December 9th, 1977. As phone calls from the East Area Rapist had now become a recurring theme, during the build-up to the Christmas period, a previous victim of his received repeated phone calls from a man that she believed to be the same man who had attacked her at gunpoint. And this one again links to that Black Christmas movie. Amidst heavy breathing and laughter, all that the woman is able to make out in the distortion is "Merry Christmas, it's me again." Which, yeah, spooky. December 10th, 1977, the following night at around 10 p.m, Sacramento police received 2 calls from a man who delivered the following message.
I'm going to hit tonight. What avenue?
Well, what avenue was it?
I'm gonna hit tonight. What avenue? Then Dan's gonna... Yeah.
I'm gonna fuck again tonight, be careful.
Be careful.
It's like your wedding night, isn't it? Oh, Dan, I've got a headache.
Be careful.
I'm allergic to nuts.
So a few hours later, a masked man was seen cycling along Watt Avenue Bridge, but was able to ditch the bike and flee on foot into a wooded area as police cars headed towards him. So despite these threats and also this threat on the phone call, no attacks were confirmed to have taken place in the promised locations during this particular night. January 2nd, 1978. More calls continue to come from the East Area Rapist, and he's doing this to both prospective victims as well as previous victims. And now this call that we're about to play, the first time he calls the house 2 times, but the first time he calls, he just says, "Hello, is Ray there?" And he's likely doing this to confirm who is home, who is available to answer the phone, and potentially to hear whoever answers the phone's voice to see if he can recognize his victim's voice in the call. Obviously, I mean, they had phone books there at the time, and he obviously was stalking various houses, repeatedly. But if he's trying to find someone that maybe he attacked, the decade prior, he may not know if they're home or not. So this is the first call where he's probing.
Hello? Yes, Ray there? Honey? Is Ray there? I'm sorry, Miss Everett.
Later in the evening, the caller calls the same number once again, but this time the call is far more disturbing.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
So yeah, that's the one that reminds me a lot of the Black Christmas calls. Gonna kill you, bitch, 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 fucking whore. Is, I think, kind of to summarize that call. But it's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, it is terrible. That's the call that's on most documentaries at the beginning. They use that little that bit there because it is terrifying. And as I said, the voice doesn't not go with if you look at him, it doesn't really make sense.
But the other thing is, you obviously in that call you can hear what sounds like a family in the background. It's not completely clear whether that's at her end or his end, but this has led obviously people then to speculate at the time the killer or attacker had a young family that they could hear in the background. Imagine that going into, you're not even, because phones are on the call at the time then, so you can't even sneak off into a room and make that, sneaky call.
You walk past your dad and he's just going on the phone, you're like, are you all right? What are you doing? Dad, that's not your inhaler. Cheese pizza. But yes, January 6th, 1978, Contact Counselling Services receive a phone call from a man claiming to be the East Area Rapist. The man states to the call handler before hanging up,
I have a problem. I need help because I don't want to do this anymore. I believe you are tracing this call.
But as we know, a lot of people have come forward in the past who have nothing to do with the case. You know, some either they're dealing with their own difficulties and they even might believe they are, or, you know, they're just doing it to essentially mess with the police. February 2nd, 1978, 21-year-old Brian Keith Majore and his 20-year-old wife, Katie, were walking their dog around the neighbourhood of Rancho Cordova. That was unknowingly the same neighbourhood that DeAngelo was staking out. As the pair saw a masked man emerging from a property suddenly noticed them, they began to flee the area. But unfortunately, they were tracked down by the man and both of them were shot multiple times, dying instantly. As I said earlier on, the progression from, as Ben said many a time, ransacking to now, you know, he had people who did witness and he'd flee. Now it's no one can see who I am. He's like got that fear of it. It's like there'll be no witnesses left. But the escalation in this case is one of the things I find like particularly disturbing. The year of 1978 and throughout the course of 1978, 15 home invasions that resulted in the rape of women were confirmed at the hands of the East Area rapist. However, they moved from the Sacramento County area to the San Joaquin, Yolo, Santa Clara, Contra Costa and Stanislaus County areas. Numerous victims reported hearing the words, "I hate you, Bonnie," during their attacks. And as I mentioned earlier on, Bonnie, who was essentially his first love, who refused his romantic proposal with a gun, he would harbour that hatred towards her and women from there. He was heard saying, "I hate you, Bonnie," whilst committing these attacks. So, you know, you imagine he's picturing her whilst he's committing these offences, which I'm sure probably stayed in Bonnie's mind as well. During this year, there was also beliefs that he was responsible for the November 11th double murder of a mother and 4-year-old daughter in Simi Valley, California, for which an innocent man named Craig Coley was wrongfully convicted and spent 39 years in prison for. But this was later ruled out for future advancements in DNA evidence.
It's terrifying, isn't it? There are so many victims in this case, but there were also... What's fascinating is when they start to piece, because at this point they do not associate the East Area rapist with the Visalia ransacker, later the Golden State Killer, the original Night Stalker. They aren't making these associations yet, and each of those monikers that he was given or went by, yes, and yes, I was just going to say Ross, but there's no point. Sorry. No, it's fine. So each of these, what they believe to be separate criminals, had such a large list of victims that they were then believing, well, they were looking at people that had recently been paroled in the area, they were looking at repeat offenders in the area, and there were people that were convicted of crimes that DeAngelo had committed under all these different monikers. This is also the fairly harrowing part as well.
39 years though, that's like you going to prison bed at 4 and coming out now.
Fucking hell.
No, I'm only kidding.
He's joking. He is joking. Yeah, that's...
unfathomable.
Yes, there must have been some compensation, surely.
Coley got $4.9 million.
Oh, good. Good. I wouldn't do it for 4.9 million.
39 years for 4.9 million. No, thank you, sir.
So around this same year, basically what appears to be a dropped notebook or 3 sheets of paper from a notebook were found near a suspicious vehicle in an area where both the East Area rapist and the Visalia ransacker had been present previously. So 2 of the 3 pieces of paper are what appears to be like journal entries, and it's written from the perspective of a student that really dislikes and has been shamed by his teacher. And it talks about the pain and suffering it caused, and that would scar his memory for life and be ashamed for his 6th grade teacher forever. The 3rd piece is what is referred to as a punishment map. Now, this is a hand-drawn map of what appears to be a suburban neighborhood like many of the others that he had staked out previously. However, it had the word punishment scribbled in very aggressively on the reverse side of the map. It also had certain houses marked with certain points, and it looked as though it was fairly legitimately drawn, as if it was from an actual... It all seemed to have the right dimensions and be to scale. However, it's believed to be a neighborhood of fantasy rather than a legitimate location. But yeah, it's the writer's desired striking ground, like his dream neighborhood to be able to either ransack or rape. To either ransack or attack people within.
I would just not say the word ransack.
To conduct a spree of crimes within. One of them will be okay, right? So the year of 1979, the first half of this year marked the final months of activity of the East Area Rapist before he would return as the original Night Stalker. A total of 6 rapes were reported in Sacramento, Contra Costa and Alameda counties. And within this time, I mentioned earlier the Reddit thread that I found. This is where a series of dogs were also found dead or also found severely injured in the area that these attacks took place. So yeah, apparently again, he'd be hiding not only at nighttime, but during the day, where he would then stalk out houses, but anyone that interrupted him or any animals that interrupted him would result in serious injury or potentially even death. Which is hideous.
October 1st, 1979, shortly after his arrest and dismissal from the police force, DeAngelo moves his family once again, this time to Southern California. Here he takes on new work as a truck mechanic. The relocation gave him the opportunity and a fresh start to escalate his criminal activities. He starts by attempting to murder a couple after breaking into their home in Santa Barbara in the middle of the night. This attack was fortunately interrupted by an FBI agent who lived next door, and the attacker fled the scene on a bicycle, leaving behind shoe prints in the front garden. Yeah, that was another menacing thing with this case. It was the shoe prints in the mud, looking through windows and things like that, which just the thought of that is horrible. But very handy having an FBI agent living next door.
You would think that at this point, DeAngelo had been, again, that word, meticulous enough to know. And maybe he did it because there was an FBI agent. He's, upping the stakes.
Or maybe he thought he was just wearing one of those novelty T-shirts, the FBI ones.
Booby inspector.
Pardon?
Look at that one. Sorry? The federal booby inspector.
I think it's just boob.
Replica.
Rather than booby. For some reason that sounds worse. December 30th, 1979, numerous 911 calls are made to Goleta Police Department after gunshots were heard on the Avenida Paquina. Upon responding, police find 44-year-old Robert Offerman and 35-year-old Deborah Manning deceased due to gunshot wounds, with both of them appearing to be bound. Police also noticed large dog prints in the apartment, suggesting that the killer brought a dog with him. A bicycle was stolen from the property and used to flee. Yeah, another thing to mention here is it wouldn't be unlike DeAngelo to, have them tied up and bound, get a beer from the fridge, very relaxed, and just kind of taunting them with even kind of showing how he's not on edge, he's able to kind of just take it all in his stride and just be very which obviously, DNA evidence, I'm sure if he knew how that would later on lead in DNA, he wouldn't be just swigging bottles of beer, but yeah.
He is everything that BTK wishes he was.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a shadowing in some ways, but even BTK fitting the security systems into homes, it's having that knowledge and and knowing how to manipulate it.
But I dare to say he was a bit softer because he'd obviously put pillows under their chests to make sure they were comfortable, whereas DeAngelo plates on the back, opposites really.
True.
March 13th, 1980, 43-year-old Lyman Smith and his 33-year-old wife Charlene were found dead in a similar manner. However, this time, the pair appeared to have been bludgeoned to death with pieces of firewood after having been bound. Charlene showed signs of having been raped, and a diamond knot was used to tie Charlene's wrist, leading to local press to dub the killer, albeit for a very short period of time, the Diamond Knot Killer. So again, they're not linking any of these crimes that we've discussed at this point so far. And again, they wouldn't link it for a couple of decades still. August 19th, 1980, 5 months later, an almost identical double murder takes place, this time ending the lives of Keith and Patrice Harrington. Like the Smiths, the pair had been bound and bludgeoned to death, with clear signs that Patrice had been raped, but no murder weapon could be found. February 6, 1981, 28-year-old Manuela Witter was home alone due to her husband being in the hospital. She was attacked whilst she slept before being bound, raped and murdered. Although she had bruising on her wrists and ankles, no ligatures or murder weapon could be found.
July 27, 1981, the 10th and 11th murder victims of DeAngelo were claimed when 27-year-old Gregory Sanchez and 35-year-old Cherie Domingo were attacked in their home whilst they were sleeping. This time, Sanchez was not bound whilst the female on the property was attacked. He was shot in the face before being bludgeoned with a gardening tool. Cherie, meanwhile, was bound, raped and bludgeoned to death. There were signs at the scene that there may have been a struggle. Multiple fibres were left on Cherie and Gregory's bodies, with a piece of industrial shipping twine found by the bed. Another thing to note on this would be a lot of the times when DeAngelo would make the wife or the girlfriend bound and tie up, the partner. They would often try and tie it quite loose so they were able to escape. But he was very on that, and if they were to do that, he would, in brackets, punish them more so. I still, find the idea of him targeting couple houses just to make it more difficult for him. So sick.
At the same time as well, the escalation from strangling and shooting people to beating people to death with pieces of firewood, which not to make light of it, I don't imagine that's an easy thing to do. There's so much rage and force behind that to do that to someone. Is it him still escalating, or at this point is it just completely consuming him?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think obviously it's a lot more, can be a lot bloodier way to go, so maybe it's escalation. Late 1982, amidst all the chaos caused by the original Night Stalker, DeAngelo makes time to call one of his former East Area rapist victims at the Denny's restaurant that she works at. She claimed that during the call, he threatened to rape her once again. So the fact he's keeping tabs on these victims as well, it just shows how obsessed he is, and any moment he might call you, he'll call you at work or call you at home. There's no way you can leave, and he knows everything you do. Just imagine you're working in a restaurant and you could think anyone I'm serving here could be the guy.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Yeah, he knows who they are, where they live, where they work, and this is decades prior as well. So he's keeping all of this. It is, shocking and terrifying.
May 4th, 1986, almost 5 years after the last confirmed attack, whilst her parents were away on holiday in Mexico, 18-year-old Janelle Cruz was attacked, bound and raped and bludgeoned to death after an intruder broke into the family home. A pipe wrench was noted missing by Janelle's father when he returned to the scene. Two men, Brett Glasby and Paul Schneider, were incorrectly linked to this particular murder, with Schneider later being cleared by DNA evidence.
1991, another 5 years go by with little to report on, or at least from what is known. However, a former victim of the East Area rapist receives a phone call from her attacker. She claims to police that she could hear a woman and children in the background, leading police to now suspect a man with a family rather than a loner. Later that same year, however, Sharon Huddle and DeAngelo separated without getting a divorce, despite Huddle at the time working as a divorce attorney. So I think what they did is they agreed to separate. They agreed to, he would predominantly live away from the home, but they didn't want to officially file for divorce yet, but that will come. 1996, yet another 5 years go by with little of note. However, this year, Joseph DeAngelo was arrested for failing to pay for petrol, but the charge was later dropped. There's always one of these, isn't there? There's always one almost.
Yeah, there's been a couple times in this case, isn't there, where, if the police chief, when thinking that his life has been threatened, followed up on it, this could have prevented all this. And then, just the kind of something as blasé as that, it wouldn't have prevented much further things happening, but at least it would have resolved the case a lot sooner.
April 6th, 2001, and this is a fourth sequence of 5 years going by for something key of note happening. And this time, a former victim of the East Area rapist receives a phone call from a distorted, heavily breathing voice, which stated after a lengthy period of silence, this one is so creepy. Remember when we played? As well as this call being very, very creepy, this was 10 years after what was believed to be the last confirmed phone call to the Denny's. Later in the same year, with the advancements in DNA technology, links were started to be formed between the rapes of the East Area rapist as well as the rapes and murders of the original Night Stalker. And this is where the less catchy name of Earons was born with that unification.
February 27th, 2013, in an attempt to raise awareness of the links between the Earons unsolved case, crime writer Michelle McNamara released a series of articles on her website True Crime Diary, coining the name The Golden State Killer. Michelle, there's a really good documentary which I highly recommend, which it follows up with Michelle in terms of, she features throughout it, about her kind of obsession to help solve the case. But I'll Be Gone in the Dark, a TV series, is very worth a watch if you want to learn more about the case. Michelle was married to Patton Oswalt, the comedian, does the voice of Ratatouille. But according to Patton, Michelle was obsessed with true crime and had become particularly fascinated by unsolved cases. Her website included a huge amount of information about all the different rapes and murders, including extensive details obtained based on numerous visits that she and Patton made to multiple attack locations. So it's interesting because it seems from doing the research on this that changing the name to the Golden State Killer and linking all these things together, it really brought eyes and eyeballs and people intrigued to the case, and it just goes to show the power of a name on a case. Earons, that's very forgettable, but she was a true light leading all the investigations of this. She was able to glean information from detectives in certain areas and link them all together. Sadly, she would go on to pass before this was all resolved, but because of her hard work, it was able to help people actually lead up to the capture of DeAngelo.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people had kind of written this case off because there were links to the Zodiac killer. There were a lot of people at this point, 30, 40 years after some of the crimes, just ready to write it off and say, you know, look, it's unsolved. It's you know, it's a cold case. But yeah, she became completely gripped by this case, and then obviously making the comparisons to original Night Stalker, East Area Rapist. It's pulled it all together, and this new name, as Tom said, is the most infamous name that he now has.
Definitely. June 15th, 2016, the FBI released additional information, links to the other murders, updated composite sketches, as well as the announcement of a $50,000 reward for any information that would lead to the capture of the Golden State Killer.
In late 2017, through using genetic genealogy, a website called GEDmatch, which I think is basically similar to Ancestry.com, very similar. Through using this website, the FBI were able to use DNA that was obtained of the crime scenes in the 1970s and 1980s. And initially, the list that they had was in the thousands, but it was narrowed down to then between 10 and 20 people who they believed to have the same great-great-great-grandparents as the Golden State Killer. From this list, the FBI worked together with leading genealogist Barbara Ray Venter, and they basically used that information to draw up a family tree and further narrow down their suspects. And by doing this, they then had 2 prime suspects remaining. One of them was soon ruled out after a relative's DNA test was conducted, leaving just one person left on their list, and this was Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., but they still needed his DNA.
April 24th, 2018, after several agonising months of trying, the FBI were able to gather DNA from samples from DeAngelo's door handle, as well as tissue that was allegedly found on the floor next to the rubbish bins. So plainly was in the bin and they just scooped it out. Both samples matched the Golden State Killer samples perfectly. 73-year-old DeAngelo was arrested outside of his house later that evening and charged with, at the time, 8 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances.
Yeah, so at the time that he was arrested, he was considered, just the old man next door. I mean, some of his neighbours didn't like him. He'd made threats to their loud animals. One particular neighbour referred to him as Mad Joe. He said it in a really weird way. He said, if that dog doesn't stop barking, I will deliver it a load of death.
Like a wrestler.
It is a bit, yeah.
Mad Joe, the wrestler, yeah.
Mad Joe, yeah. When he was arrested, he sort of played the idea of this frail old man. He said, I've got roast beef in the oven. And yeah, he all of a sudden becomes very frail, which we'll see throughout the trial. But yeah, to everyone else, he was just this polite old man that lived by himself and didn't harm anybody. And it turns out to have been this monster that committed more than 180 crimes. It's terrifying.
4 additional counts of first-degree murder were added the following month, and when questioned, DeAngelo made several confessions using an inner personality called Jerry, stating that Jerry forced him to commit more than 180 crimes. I don't know if that's the same as what the fuck is his name? Oh, Derek Okora. When he's got that person he speaks to find the ghosts. If he's like, oh, okay, thank you. It was Jerry. Jerry told me did it. Not worth it. DeAngelo stated the following when interrogated about Jerry.
I didn't have the strength to push him out. He made me. He went with me. It was like in my head. I mean, he's a part of me. I didn't want to do those things. I pushed Jerry out and had a happy life. I did all those things. I destroyed all their lives. So now I've got to pay the price.
Sounds like Mel C talking about ginger spice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jerry. I mean, it's loose, but it definitely did work. So over the years 2018 to 2020, the trial of DeAngelo had begun. Very complicated time. I'm sure people will be familiar with the images of him wearing the mask. It was during COVID. It was a huge case, obviously. Lots and lots of victims or victims' families involved. Originally, they were going for the death penalty. DeAngelo massively played off this idea that, like Ben said, he was, an ill old man, unable to do things. But there was some quite creepy footage of him walking into the jail cell with a cane, looking all frail. Then he's just walking, he's literally climbing on tables and doing things in there. So he's just showing how he's trying to be manipulative immediately to everyone. But essentially, they were going for the death penalty at the beginning. The lead prosecutor on the case said during an interview that one of the victims of the case, she had cancer and she didn't have long left. And she was there every day of the trial. And they changed it from a death penalty just to get conviction because death penalty would have taken a lot longer. And luckily she was able to survive to see him being sentenced. whereas if there was the death penalty, sadly, she passed away soon after the sentencing. So he was happy that she got to have closure before she passed.
Definitely. And yeah, he did. He really played on this frail old man thing, because he was often in a wheelchair in the trial. He was often pretending he was he may have been hard of hearing, to be fair, but I just always remember he was made to sit through several victim testimonies, and they were from both men and women that he had caused immense pain to, and he refused to look any of them in the eye.
Yeah.
But when he was asked how he pled, he sort of was like, oh, guilty. Then after he's heard all of their testimonies, he stands up and goes, I've heard all your he's like perfectly fine. But at the time, until he's entered his plea, he was really just, sorry, guilty.
The video of him apologising, it's, as I said, the voice just doesn't, especially because you see him being frail and all that stuff, it just doesn't fit. But then it really just highlights the manipulation side of him and how, he's trying to portray this character. But yeah, it was really, seeing the victims go in there, Bonnie would go in there as well, but because she wasn't a victim, she wasn't actually allowed to talk in the case. So one of the victims spoke on her behalf, and she was just staring, looking at him in the eye and going through all this as well. But yeah, some really strong women in this case, some really strong women who stood up to him and, just basically were saying kind of fuck you, looking at him and like, you're a weak man, you're caught now. Those women felt justice, and one of the people was saying they hope he has a nice long life behind bars.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Dan mentioned earlier on the case of statute of limitations, such as limitations when it comes to rape. He wasn't able to be prosecuted on any of the rapes that he committed, which obviously we know he committed at least 50 rapes, and he was unable to be prosecuted on them because of statute of limitations, which that is mental. That's in California, so I'm not sure. I don't believe that's around the whole of the US. Hopefully those victims as well were able to feel some kind of justice. But I know in cases, if people aren't convicted for the particular crime committed against them, sometimes they don't feel the closure. But hopefully, there was some kind of justice for them.
Yeah, completely. And the numbers that we've used in this episode as well are only the confirmed ones, which to me, I feel like there could be far, far more that he just hasn't. Either
100%.
Either he's forgotten about. I doubt he's forgotten about it, knowing him, but it's just simply not been charged with or not been discussed at this point, because there were so many other. He was linked briefly to possibly also being the Zodiac Killer, Mr. Cruel over in Australia. There are links to the Cordova cat burglar, the Exeter ransacker, another ransacker. But again, they've sentenced him for as much as they've been able to at this point. And currently in California State Prison, 78 years old, and he'll be there for the rest of his life.
Yeah, the prosecutor was saying that he checks in to see, the state of him like regularly. And he's like, yeah, he's got a job in the prison, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. And I was like, oh God, why are you being teasy and flirty about that? It's like, all right, well, what is it? Unless he's the warden, I think people aren't going to be like, Jesus. And yes, guys, that is the first episode of Series 10. You might have noticed we've tweaked the format ever so slightly, wanting to get into the case a bit quicker, but we are happy to be back. This series has got a lot of big cases. We are kind of going back to more the traditional true crime this series. Last series was the series of curveballs. This series is more back to true crime, back to some horrific cases.
So we're going back to sort of the darker side of the world of true crime. And there are some very sinister and disturbing cases coming up in this series. In the meantime, while we've been on our break between series 9 and 10, we have been very busy over at our website. So currently on our website, icmap.co.uk, we have around 170 episodes up there at the moment. And you can listen. It's just, damn, Daniel.
Damn, Daniel, back at it again with those episodes.
Hey.
You can listen to them in audio format and pop them on your favourite player, or you can watch video versions of them. And we've done, some very big cases lately. The murder of Sophie Lancaster, the Mary Vincent case, the Gemma Mitchell beheading, and the making of the movie Raw.
Hey, Ben, shut up a second. We've also got some big news. You can not only need to go on our website to find it, but if you're an Apple user and you have an iPhone, we are actually now available just going through the Apple Podcast app and subscribing onto there, where you get all of the audio. So if you're a bit like, the website, that's a lot of faff, which it isn't, it's a great place to be. But if you are thinking it's a lot of faff, you can subscribe there for $2.99 a month and you get access to all of the episodes and all the new episodes coming out. So if you just listen to us on audio and you want to do it through that, then that is a new way that we are bringing the content to you guys.
Absolutely. And if you want to get up close and personal to us, then we will be appearing at this year's CrimeCon London event. And again, by joining our website, you get an exclusive discount on that. But you can also use our code ICMAP at ticket checkout to get yourself a tasty little discount. And we will be there on September the 21st and September the 22nd. And we can't wait to meet. We know quite a few people have got some tickets already. We really can't wait to meet you all, see you all, and be part of what is a very immersive true crime event. So very excited about that.
I can't wait to figure out what the fuck we're going to be doing there. That's one thing. But whatever it is, it's going to be absolutely off the charts, isn't it, Dan?
Absolutely.
Dan guarantees it.
Oh, no.
Dan guarantees it. And yes, it is a new series, but some things just won't die. Ben has a cryptic clue for the next case, and we haven't heard it, so you have a live reaction from me and producer Dan. Ben, what is this week's cryptic clue?
Benjamin Carter's cryptic clues. Everyone gather round for some clues that can be quite cryptic, but he's going to give them to you anyway. Hope you can figure them out.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dan. This is for episode 2 of our temp series. In Jamaica, this is how they praise the star of Jackass. In Jamaica, this is how they praise the star of Jackass. Enjoy that one.
Oh, wow. That's even worse.
No, come on. Yeah, Tom's come up with a better one, but mine's more Ben crypticized.
Yeah, yours is an abstract way of conducting yourself as a human being. But yes, let us know what if you guys can figure that out, please do let us know. We're not going to give a prize for this one because I don't think we should reward people for being able to speak Ben's language. But yes, we'll be back again next week with a new case. As we said, we were going back to the old school, the true crime on this series, so be sure to join us next week. Thanks so much for your support, and until then, like we always say,
we say this all the time,
keep doing what you're doing.
Well, unless it's, oh, blimey, stealing a $50 coin piggy bank.
Being mean to fish?
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
That is weird.
Terrifying, isn't it?
Cryptic clues.
Well.
Anyway,
see ya.
All best.
Okay.
To Pip.
Bye-bye.
We're back.